to our first lesson on square roots. So what I want you to think about is what does this symbol mean that you see next to question number 1, and what do you think the answer would be? And then once you think about that, I want you to draw a square with an area of 36 and figure out what its side lengths would be, and then how about one with an area of 81. So go ahead and think about that for now and pause this video. Okay, so hopefully you thought about it. This symbol right here means square root, and we're going to talk about that actually throughout this entire lesson. The answer to this question is 7, because as some of you might know, the square root symbol actually means what times itself would be 49 in this case. And the second part told you to draw a square with an area of 36. Now, if it's a square, obviously, sorry, my drawing skills are not amazing, but if it's a square, that means all of the sides are equivalent. They're equal to each other. So if my area is 36, my side lengths would be 6 and 6. And a square with an area of 81, my side lengths would be 9 and 9. So the reason we did that is because it's going to come up a little bit later on. And so what does square root mean? Well, it kind of means that if there's a square with an area of 9, what would the side lengths be? So you can kind of see in here, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, an area of 9. And so our side lengths were 3 and 3, and so the square root of 9 is 3. Okay, now this is just a little bit of vocabulary for you here. I'm going to ask that you actually pause the video to write out the vocabulary words, because I'm going to go a little bit faster than you'll be able to write, I would guess. So the first vocabulary word that we are going to talk about right now is square root. So a square root is a number that produces a specified quantity when multiplied by itself. Now that sounds super fancy. But if I ask you the question, what is the square root? So let's go ahead and kind of jot this down. What is the square root of 25? What that means is I'm asking you to figure out what times itself is 25. So most of you in your head are saying, well, it's 5, duh. 5 times 5 is 25. That is true, but if you think more carefully, there is another number times itself that also equals 25. So I want you to pause the video and think about it. And when you're ready, or if you can't figure it out, you can press play. All right, so I asked you to figure out, other than 5 times 5 is 25, but what's another square root of 25? Well, the answer is negative 5, because negative 5 times negative 5 would be positive 25. So instead of writing them as two separate answers, what we can actually do is show that the answer could be positive 5 or negative 5. So again, you could give me a positive or negative answer if I just say out loud, what is the square root of a number? Now, when I first asked what's the square root of 25, I'm guessing most people thought of the positive answer. And that is a vocabulary word called the principal square root. The principal square root is the positive answer to a square root. So you'll know if it's asking you for the positive answer if it shows you the actual symbol. If I had said, solve this problem, you would have just given me the answer 5, because this symbol right here means give me the positive answer. Now, a negative square root, that's our next vocabulary word. It's the negative answer to the square root. And so for a negative square root, we would be looking for a symbol that looks like this. So if I had shown you this problem and said, what's the answer? Your answer would have been negative 5. Okay, again, I would recommend that you pause the video to kind of write this out, and then go ahead and press play whenever you're ready to move on. So in these vocabulary words, we're talking about the radical symbol at first. So that is the symbol that kind of looks similar to a division symbol, but the difference is that it has this kind of like extra piece that pops off right there. That is called the radical symbol, the square root symbol. And again, that symbol denotes a principal square root. So it's every time you see that symbol, you're answering with the positive answer. And the next vocabulary word is the radicand. The radicand is the expression underneath the radical symbol. So here, my radicand is 9. Here, my radicand happens to be an expression. It's x squared plus 3x plus 9. So radical is the symbol. Radicand is the expression underneath. All right, let's go ahead and try some of these. Simplify the following square root expressions. So in these problems, you're going to want to be careful to answer positive or negative or both positive and negative based on what you see. So this first question is, what is the square root of 169? Now, again, when we are talking about that question, we're saying what times itself equals the number underneath the radical. And so 13 times 13 is 169. So my answer here is 13. Now, I want to really briefly go over a couple things not to do. Because this looks like a division symbol, sometimes people want to put the answer up there. No, this is not a division symbol. We are not doing that. The other thing I want to mention is that sometimes people want to throw an equal sign in there. If there's no equal sign, we're not adding any in. Just go ahead and answer it and circle your answer. Your teacher will find your answer on the paper. Okay, the next question is actually asking about the negative square root. What is the negative square root of 100? Well, we're asking what times itself is 100, but it has to be a negative number. So here, we know that 10 times 10 is 100. And so we know that our answer here is negative 10. Okay, next question starts to get slightly trickier. So let's see if we could figure it out. This is asking for the positive and negative square root of the number 9/16. So we're kind of trying to figure out, first of all, when I multiply fractions, I'm just going to do a random problem down here at the bottom. Let's say I had 3/4 times 1/2. When I multiply fractions, remember I'm multiplying the numerators, and then I'm multiplying the denominators. So again, this is a random problem that didn't have to do with the problem above, but I wanted to remind you of the process for multiplying because it's going to help us to solve this square root problem. So in other words, I'm thinking what times itself is 9, and that's going to be my numerator. So I know that would be the number 3. 3 times 3 would get me to the 9. And then what times itself is 16, and that happens to be 4. Now down here, I'm going to kind of just make sure that that works. So I'm going to do 3/4 times itself, 3/4. 3 times 3 is 9. 4 times 4 is 16, so I know I'm correct. The answer isn't just 3/4 though, because I see this positive negative sign. I'm going to add that in to my answer, positive or negative 3/4. Positive and negative 3/4. Okay, and I want you to go ahead and pause the video and try letter D by yourself. Okay, so hopefully you were trying to figure out something times itself is 1, and the answer that you found was hopefully 1. And then for our denominator here, we're kind of thinking, well, something times itself is 25, and so the answer would be 5. So 1/5 times 1/5 does in fact equal 1/25. So the square root of 125 is 1/5. Okay, go ahead and pause the video and try the rest of these problems. Read the directions though. It says simplify and tell whether it's rational or irrational. So you can really only simplify them right now if they are a rational expression. So go ahead and pause it and try it by yourself. Okay, so for the first question, this one was the easiest one. The answer would be positive or negative 9, and this is a rational number because it's, we could solve the square root, and positive 9 can obviously be written as a fraction, and so can negative 9, so that's the definition of a rational number. Okay, the next problem looks like it might be irrational, but it also looks similar to the number 144. So I want you to think about that when you're making decisions as to whether it's rational or irrational. Just because there's a decimal in there doesn't mean that you can't solve the problem. So if you tried 1.2 times itself, Here you would get 4 and then a 2, and then we insert our 0. And then we would get a 2 and a 1. And when you add all of this up and move 2 decimal spaces, you find out that 1.2 times itself is 1 44/100. So the answer here is negative 1 2/10. Because again, we want the negative answer, and 1 2/10 times 1 2/10 would be 1 44/100. Okay, next problem. We see that the answer should be positive because I see the principal square root symbol. And something times something times itself is 4, that would be 2. And something times itself is 9, that would be 3. And again, if you want, you can check your answer by remultiplying them out. Again, square root means something times itself equals the number that's underneath the radical. So 2 times 2 is 4, and 3 times 3 is 9. And so I know that my answer of 2/3 is correct. All right, now this next question is a little bit tricky. 1 times 1 would be itself, but there is nothing times 3 that will, or nothing times itself that will equal 3. 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 2 is 4, and even if we try decimals in between, it's not going to work. So this is considered an irrational number. Okay, doesn't repeat, goes on forever, and so it's considered irrational. And we'll look in a moment, in a little while, at how we can figure out the answer in the calculator for those. Okay, and we'll do this one more time, so go ahead and pause the video while you solve these. If they're irrational, you can't solve them, but if they are rational, go ahead and give the answer. Okay, so hopefully you got the same answers as I did. Now, this first one was kind of a trick because it looks like 64, but if you multiply 8/10 times 8/10, you're bumping back 2 decimal spaces. That's not 6.4, that's 64/100. And so there is no way to get something times itself equaling 6 4/10. So this is actually an irrational number. If you were to type this in the calculator, it would not end and it would not repeat. Okay, letter F, something times itself equals 0. Well, the answer is 0. And this is a rational number because we can write 0 as a fraction. Next problem. This is neither rational or irrational. Again, this was almost a trick question too. So this is actually neither. It's something called an imaginary number, which we aren't really going over at this point in time, but just in case you were wondering, there is nothing times itself that will be a negative number. So we can't find the square root of -5. And then letter H, nothing times itself is going to equal exactly 16. So again, irrational. Okay, and that's it for now. Thank you for watching our first introductory video.